The fluorescent lights of the Portland vintage store flickered, casting a kaleidoscope of shadows across the racks of faded denim and velvet blazers. Ezra, 25, stood frozen, a leather jacket dangling from his hand, as the stranger's eyes met his eyes that held a storm he couldn't name. In that split second, the world shrank to the space between them, and Ezra knew nothing would ever be the same. He'd come to this quirky shop, Threads of Time, nestled in the heart of Portland's Hawthorne district, to escape the weight of his life. A graphic designer by trade, Ezra's days were a blur of deadlines and muted grays. His evenings spent nursing a coffee in his cramped apartment, avoiding the mirror that reflected a man he barely recognized. His warm brown skin and tight curls were the same as always, but the spark in his eyes had dulled since his last breakup, a relationship that ended with a slammed door and words he couldn't take back. The stranger, who introduced himself as Liam, 26, with a crooked smile and a mop of dark hair that fell into his pale blue eyes, had wandered into the store moments earlier. He carried himself with a quiet confidence, his lanky frame draped in a thrift store sweater that looked like it belonged to someone's grandfather. "You look like you know your way around a good jacket," Liam had said, nodding at the leather in Ezra's hand. His voice was soft but carried a playful edge, like he was testing the waters. Ezra laughed, caught off guard. "I just grab what looks like it won't fall apart in a week." It was a lie. He'd spent years curating his wardrobe, each piece a small rebellion against the expectations of his conservative upbringing in Georgia. But Liam didn't need to know that yet. They bantered, weaving through racks of plaid shirts and corduroy pants, their conversation flowing as easily as the Willamette River outside. Liam was a barista at a nearby cafe, a transplant from Chicago chasing the dream of finding himself in Portland's eclectic embrace. Ezra shared just enough. His love for bold colors, his hatred of early mornings, to keep the exchange light. But something in Liam's gaze, sharp and searching, made Ezra's pulse quicken. "Want to try these on?" Liam held up two jackets, a deep green bomber for himself and a burgundy velvet blazer for Ezra. "Only one fitting room's open, though. Mind sharing?" Ezra hesitated. The store was small, the fitting room barely big enough for one person, let alone two. But Liam's grin was disarming, and Ezra found himself nodding, ignoring the flutter in his chest. They squeezed into the cramped space, a single mirror reflecting their awkward dance around each other's elbows. The air smelled of old fabric and possibility. As Ezra slipped on the blazer, Liam's reflection caught his eye. The other man was watching him, not the jacket, his expression unreadable. "Looks good," Liam said, his voice lower now, almost a whisper. Ezra turned, their faces inches apart, and the world outside the curtain seemed to vanish. Then, without warning, Liam dropped to his knees. Ezra's breath caught. The fitting room felt impossibly small, the air thick with unspoken questions. Liam's hands hovered near the hem of Ezra's blazer, his fingers brushing the fabric as if adjusting it. But his eyes, those storm-filled eyes, locked onto Ezra's, and there was no mistaking the weight of the moment. No words, just a silent confession that hung between them like a spark waiting to ignite. "Liam," Ezra started, his voice barely audible, but the other man shook his head slightly, as if to say, "Not yet." He stood slowly, their gazes never breaking, and Ezra felt the pull of something deeper than attraction, something that scared him as much as it thrilled him. They left the fitting room without speaking, the jackets forgotten on the rack. Outside, the Portland rain had started, a soft drizzle that blurred the neon signs along Hawthorne. Liam pulled his sweater's hood up, his smile returning but softer now, almost shy. "Coffee?" he asked, nodding toward his cafe down the street. Ezra nodded, his heart still racing. They walked in silence, the city's pulse matching their own. The cafe, Bean in Bloom, was a warm haven of exposed brick and mismatched furniture. Over steaming mugs of espresso they talked, really talked. Liam shared how he'd left Chicago after coming out to his family, only to be met with cold silence. Ezra confessed his own struggles. The weight of being the perfect son for parents who didn't know he was gay. The fear of never finding a place where he could be himself. Hours passed, the cafe emptying around them. Ezra felt a connection he hadn't known he was starving for. A sense of being seen, not just as a designer or a son, but as himself, flaws and all. Liam's hand brushed his on the table, and neither pulled away. But the moment couldn't last. As they stepped back into the rain, Liam's phone buzzed. His face darkened as he read the message. "My ex," he muttered, shoving the phone into his pocket. "He's in town. Wants to talk." Ezra's stomach twisted. "Ex?" he asked, trying to keep his tone light. Liam sighed, running a hand through his damp hair. "Yeah, Caleb. We were together for 2 years. It didn't end well." The air between them shifted, the ease of the afternoon replaced by something heavier. Ezra wanted to ask more, but Liam's expression stopped him. Instead, they parted with a promise to meet again. Liam's number scrawled on a napkin tucked into Ezra's pocket. That night, Ezra couldn't sleep. The memory of Liam's eyes, the weight of that moment in the fitting room, played on a loop in his mind. He'd spent years building walls around his heart, but Liam had slipped past them in a single afternoon. Yet the mention of Caleb gnawed at him. Who was this ex? And why did Liam's voice carry so much pain when he spoke his name? The next day, Ezra returned to Bean in Bloom, hoping to see Liam behind the counter. Instead, he found a stranger, a woman with a shaved head and a nose ring, pouring his coffee. "Liam's off today," she said, eyeing Ezra curiously. "You're the guy from yesterday, right? He wouldn't shut up about you." Ezra's cheeks warmed, but before he could respond, the door chimed, and Liam walked in. He wasn't alone. A man with sharp cheekbones and a leather jacket, Caleb, Ezra assumed, stood beside him, his hand resting possessively on Liam's arm. The sight hit Ezra like a punch. Liam's eyes found Ezra's, and for a moment, they held a silent apology. "Ezra," he said, his voice strained. "This is Caleb." Caleb's gaze was cold, appraising. "New friend?" he asked, his tone laced with something sharp. Ezra forced a smile, his heart sinking. "Just passing through," he said, grabbing his coffee and heading for the door. He didn't look back, but the weight of Liam's stare followed him into the street. The rain was heavier now, soaking through Ezra's jacket as he walked aimlessly. He wanted to be angry, to write Liam off as just another fleeting connection. But the memory of that fitting room, of Liam's vulnerability, wouldn't let him. There was a story behind Caleb, behind Liam's pain, and Ezra couldn't shake the feeling that he was meant to be part of it. Over the next week, Ezra threw himself into work, sketching designs for a new client campaign. But his thoughts kept drifting to Liam. He hadn't texted, hadn't gone back to the cafe. Pride told him to let it go, but his heart had other plans. One evening, as he left his studio, he found Liam waiting outside, leaning against a street lamp. His hair was wet, his eyes tired but determined. "I owe you an explanation," he said before Ezra could speak. They ended up at a quiet park, sitting on a bench under a canopy of dripping trees. Liam told him everything. How Caleb had been his first love, how their relationship had been a whirlwind of passion and toxicity. Caleb's jealousy had driven a wedge between them, culminating in a fight that left Liam questioning his worth. When Caleb left for Seattle, Liam thought he was free, until the messages started again, pulling him back into old wounds. "I didn't want to drag you into this," Liam said, his voice breaking. "But that day in the fitting room I felt something real. For the first time in a long time." Ezra reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining. "You don't have to carry it alone," he said softly. Liam's eyes glistened, and he leaned in, their foreheads touching. The rain fell around them, but in that moment, they were untouchable. Ezra knew this was only the beginning, that Caleb's shadow loomed large, but he also knew he wasn't walking away. The weeks that followed were a dance of joy and tension. Ezra and Liam grew closer, their days filled with late-night talks, shared playlists, and stolen kisses in Portland's hidden corners. But Caleb's presence lingered. He'd show up at the cafe unannounced, his words dripping with charm one moment and venom the next. Liam tried to keep him at a distance, but Ezra could see the toll it took. One night, at a local art gallery opening, everything came to a head. Ezra had invited Liam to see his latest design project, a series of posters celebrating Portland's diversity. The gallery was packed, the air buzzing with chatter and clinking glasses. Liam stood by Ezra's side, his hand brushing Ezra's as they admired the work. Then Caleb appeared, his leather jacket out of place among the artsy crowd. "Nice setup," he said, his eyes on Liam. "Didn't know you were into this kind of thing." Liam tensed, but Ezra stepped forward. "He's here with me," he said, his voice steady despite the knot in his stomach. Caleb's smile was razor-sharp. "You think you know him? You don't know half of what he's capable of." The words stung, but Liam grabbed Ezra's arm, pulling him away. "He's not worth it," he whispered, but his hands were shaking. Outside, under the glow of a streetlight, Liam broke down. "I thought I could move on," he said, tears streaming down his face. "But he keeps pulling me back, making me feel like I'm nothing." Ezra cupped Liam's face, his own eyes burning. "You're everything," he said fiercely. "You're not his. You're not anyone's. You're you, and that's enough." Liam's sob turned into a laugh, raw and real. He pulled Ezra into a kiss, desperate and full of promise. The city moved around them, but they were still anchored to each other. Months later, Ezra and Liam stood in threads of time again, the same leather jacket in Ezra's hand. Caleb was gone, his messages unanswered, his shadow fading with each day Liam chose himself. The fitting room moment had become their story's cornerstone, a reminder of the spark that started it all. They weren't perfect. Ezra still wrestled with his family's expectations, and Liam carried scars that would never fully heal. But they faced it together, their love a quiet rebellion against a world that tried to define them. As they slipped into the fitting room, laughing about how it all began, Ezra caught Liam's eye in the mirror. "No kneeling this time," Ezra teased. Liam grinned, pulling him close. "Not yet," he whispered, and Ezra knew, without a doubt, they'd write their own ending, one thread at a time.